thanks ever so. And as you say, we've been overwhelmed by the response to this annual summit 23. We've had over 3,000 people sign up to attend the sessions that we've run right through the week. And it's amazing to think that this is our final one, the grand finale. We're really pleased that we've managed to do this fairly smoothly, albeit virtually. And I know there's still a real burning desire for people to get back together. And we do hope that our future events will be an element, either hybrid or in-person sessions. But this is the final one. And we kicked off the week looking at sort of like last time movers and shakers. And it seems quite appropriate that we should end the week looking at accelerating delivery of later life and later living solutions. And we've got a fantastic panel that I'm going to invite Paula Broadbent, who's going to chair this session, to talk about. Can I also, while I mention her, to say a big thanks to Lovell Later Living and the team there for supporting this summit, and in particular this session. They are one of our headline sponsors, as you can see from this slide, the others being Guinness Partnership, Tunstall, and the UKRI Healthy Aging Challenge. And we're also joined by associate sponsors during the week, Extra Care Chapel Trust, Faithful and Gould, who some of you will have heard this morning, Housing 21, Invisible Creations, Johnny Johnson Group, ProCare Limited, PRP, and Shakespeare Martineau. So a big thanks to all of those. But it gives me great pleasure to invite Paula to take the virtual platform and to take the virtual floor to run us through this particular session. And I really look forward to listening to all the contributions from a real impressive cast of speakers. So Paula, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jeremy, and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this final session of the summit. I think there's been some great comment right throughout the week that's had some really fantastic feedback. So hopefully everybody's going to enjoy this final session today and find it very thought-provoking. We've asked panelists to join us this afternoon from various parts of the sector and also from an academic point of view, and also from central government, really to just put the spotlight on how we've typically been providing solutions for later living across the market, and that's across all tenures and all property types, and really sort of just to put that spotlight on and reflect on, well, are we really getting this right? Because we hear lots and lots from research in relation to how, you know, we are so behind where demand is, and we're still not meeting the needs, you know, of people in later life and providing them solutions and options really to make those choices much younger in that aging process. So this really is about challenging ourselves and thinking about, are we really doing the right thing, and how can we just challenge that status quo that we appear to have been stuck in now for decades. So the four speakers that are with us today are Professor Les Mayhew, and Les, those of you may be familiar with the Mayhew Review, and which Les will share some of the real highlights of that research with us this afternoon. Mary Parsons, who's the Regeneration Partnerships Director from Lovell Partnerships. So Mary is a colleague of mine, as Lovell Later Living is a wholly owned subsidiary of Lovell Partnerships. And I've asked Mary to come along and join us today and just share some of Mary's experience, some vast experience over the decades, working in a number of sectors, but also really focusing in on the sort of the whole better building agenda and creating place. And we've got Patrick joining us today from Pollard Thomas Edwards Architects, and Patrick has been quite instrumental within the co-housing environment and has worked with a number of co-housing groups and looking at where people have actually taken it into their own hands to develop the solutions that they want in later life. And then finally, rounded off the speakers today will be Greg Wilkinson, who's joined us from the Department of Levelling Up. And Greg will be able to give us some updates on exactly where we are from a government point of view. So without further ado, I will introduce each of the speakers in turn, who will be giving you their presentation and their views on the matter. Please feel free to put any questions in the chat, and in the question and answer session, we'll make sure we collect those for the panel at the end, or if you wanted anything in particular answered by any of the panelists or information, please feel free to put it in there. We'll have time at the end of the session then for the panelists to basically join in conversation, and we want the conversation to include yourselves. So please do reach out with any questions that you do have, as I say, either throughout the session or towards the end. And I hope you enjoy the session this afternoon and get as much out of it as we hope has been put into it for you. Without further ado, I will introduce Les Mayhew.
Hello and good afternoon, everyone, and great pleasure to be with you today, and thank you for inviting me to speak. In spring last year, I was asked to review the case for retirement living. It was an independent review which became known as the Mayhew Review. It was funded by with a grant from ARCO and facilitated by the International Longevity Centre UK, for whom I work. The report was launched in the House of Commons last November to an audience of politicians, operators, and many others. It was a very interesting session, which went pretty well, I would say. The review involved both a huge amount of analysis of some quite complex issues and some crystal ball gazing on what good would look like in 2040, taking account of what was possible in the timescale and evidence on what works. So I consulted widely as I could with operators and the retirement industry generally. We ran a survey and a roundtable, conducted interviews, and wrote up the findings for the specialist press and others. I continue to write articles on the subject, which suggests there is still a lot of interest in following it up. And reference to the report was also contained in a government consultation document on levelling up. And there have been meetings between myself and others with officials at the Department of Health and Social Care and with the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities. The report itself is hosted on several sites, and hopefully many of you have seen and read it already, including HousingLIN's. It's entitled Future-Proofing Retirement Living, Easing the Care and Housing Crises. So in the review, I spell out what needs to happen and why. My arguments also speak to connected areas of policy, whether the wider housing crisis, the shortage of affordable homes, house price inflation, stagnating incomes, or the generational consequences of young people and families not able to get on the housing ladder. First and foremost, I argue that care needs need to become more preventative, more people-centred, and to be delivered more efficiently. Unusually for reviews like this, it doesn't ask for government money. There are actually lots of private investors lining up to oblige. That was what I learned from this anyway. The only recommendation that will cost is putting stamp duty on the same basis for last-time buyers as for first-time buyers. But I don't think it will be all that expensive. More of that later. History shows that something like this needs a big push from central government, as well as an alignment of policies in three sectors: health and social care, housing policy, and in planning. The main requirement is for the government to get its ducks in a row, to recognise what's going on in the sector by looking at the whole thing strategically, which is what I try to do. Secondly, to set up interdepartmental machinery headed up by a minister to make sure it happens, and I'm sure we'll hear more about progress on that front later. A key breakthrough would be to get them to recognise that building more retirement homes should be on a par with first-time buyers and to change their policies accordingly. Planning obstacles especially came in for a lot of stick in the review, in both our survey and the industry roundtable, which we undertook as part of the review. On a positive note, there are lots of win-wins in my findings, whether it is helping older people to live in appropriate and better accommodation, easing the housing crisis by freeing up oversized homes for next generations, improving health of older people so that they use the NHS less, more efficient delivery of social care and improved access to care, repurposing failing town centres, part of the levelling up agenda, providing access to financial advice, levelling up disparities in retirement housing in the country, and finally, little bit off piece perhaps, improving the thermal efficiency and climate proofing of old stock, which I think this presents an opportunity for. I back up my findings with an analysis of what the future could look like if you do nothing, but also if you built at a much bigger scale. In the review, I was open to different retirement models, but I was convinced of the case for independent living in integrated surroundings and the importance of timely access to care. I analysed where we were now and where we needed to be in 2040, given the population ageing and also the growth in the population as a whole. By 2040, the older population would number over 17 million, and that over 25% of the population in most areas of the country would be age 65 plus. I also argued that far too many lived in standard mainstream housing, and this was having two effects. First, it was becoming ever more expensive, but also inefficient to deliver social care across a widely dispersed older population, which will eventually become unsustainable. Second, houses are becoming ever more under-occupied due to aging, which is blocking the chances for young families from upsizing and first-time buyers from getting on the housing ladder, again piling upward pressure on house prices. Central plank of what I say in the report is that we need to build more retirement homes, not surprisingly, but 50,000 a year to be precise. That would equate to about 25% of all new homes. I suggest developments should be built to an average of 60 to 100 retirement units per development in integrated settings. This would make it more economic to deliver care 24/7 and more economic to provide immediate amenities for residents to enjoy. We also need to make more efficient use of our housing stock, but also sweep away some of the obstacles responsible for the inertia. A key example of this was anomalies in the planning regulations, which favoured residential and nursing care facilities, which is not retirement living, but often thought as so. Doing this would ease both the care and housing crisis. It would also lead to improvements in the existing stock. The report spells out the details. Okay, some of the hurdles we face now. As I said, a majority of older people live in standard or mainstream housing, not in specialist retirement accommodation. Of these, we expect 6.2 million to live alone by 2040, and this includes nearly 2 million in the vulnerable 85 plus age range. There will be comparable increases in staffing levels in all sectors. For example, the number of informal carers, just to take an example, providing 20 hours of care a week or more, will approach nearly 3 million. As I said earlier, this leads us to the uncomfortable conclusion that the social care system will flounder because there are not enough workers to deliver care to this widely dispersed older population. Let me spill out a few more stats demonstrating the urgency of the problem and the importance of taking this strategic view. On the demography side, there are several warning signals. By 2040, we expect there to be nearly 12 million older households, 3.5 million more than today, whilst 1 in 4 of the population will be aged 65 plus. Households are shrinking in size year on year. If people lived in homes more suited to their needs, 50,000 fewer homes a year would be needed. Using the housing stock more efficiently is therefore key. Put another way, almost as many bedrooms are being decommissioned through under-occupation as are being rebuilt or replenished through the construction industry. So it's like trying to push water uphill, if you like. Although there are around 180,000 new 65 plus households added each year, only around 7,000 retirement homes are being built. This compares with around 200,000 new housing starts a year. Many people want to downsize, but they can't due to a shortage of supply and the financial and other complexities involved. I calculate there's something like 22 million surplus bedrooms, 12 million of which in the 65 plus age bracket. Turning to my recommendations, I tried to address each of these issues. There are relatively few because I tried not to be too detailed in order to make sure they would get noticed. First, there should be an accelerated programme of retirement housing construction with up to 50,000 new units a year, or 1/4 of all housing starts. There should be a significant expansion in the number of integrated retirement communities built each year. I suggest, and this is quite a striking ambition, 500 evenly spread through the country. Development sites should include town centres as part of local regeneration programmes. There should be closer working between planners and social care to ensure housing with care is factored into local plans. Planning departments should put retirement housing on a level playing field with other building developments, including care homes. Independent financial advice should be available for those who want to move into retirement housing or similar accommodation. And there should be improved financial incentives to encourage downsizing. We recommend putting stamp duty for last-time buyers on an equal footing with first-time buyers. Last and not least, the government's Older People's Housing Taskforce should be mandated to implement the recommendations and report on the outcomes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Les. Some really insightful research there, which I'm sure we will all agree. Some of which I think lots of us have been talking about for a number of years, and we're aware that these stats have been around and are only going in one direction, which is another reason why we need to start listening to the research and working out what the solutions are and bringing those forward. Some really interesting points there that I think we'll definitely pick up in the conversation at the end as well. So Mary, if you would like to step in now and give us your presentation.
Thanks, Paula. I'm hopefully sharing on screen. That's okay. Excellent. That's the first hurdle overcome with. Now, I think it's fair to say I'm going to come at this at a slightly different angle to Les. However, I think so many points that was just made will hopefully sort of echo through what I'm going to say as well. So I was asked to really speak, not just from my day job with Lovell, my former life within the housing association sector and experience of doing these developments, but in particular, the experience I had as one of the commissioners for the government's Building Better, Building Beautiful Commission that published its report, Living with Beauty, back in January 2020. So a couple of months before COVID took over our lives in a way we could not have imagined, but following over 12 months of very intensive UK-wide research. And the commission was chaired by the late Sir Roger Scruton, and Roger sadly died literally 2 weeks before we launched the report. We'd finished the editing, we'd put the report to bed, and sadly he wasn't around to see the positive response overall that it got from the industry and across all sectors, despite the controversy that had raged when it was first launched. This quote from Roger really sums up for me something that we sometimes lose sight of when we're talking about retirement homes, and that's the decision for people to move home at that point in their lives. You know, Roger talked about the ghosts of our ancestors, but our home is more than the four walls that surround us. It's the statement of who we are, and it's the sum total of our lived experiences. And to ask someone who may be perhaps at a vulnerable point in their lives to up sticks and move to something different, we can give all the logical arguments and all of the benefits, but we really have to take that sense of what a home means to someone. And the commission looked at beauty in different dimensions and scales. A lot of people thought it was going to be a debate about buildings and architecture. Well, to be honest, it wasn't. There was a lot about beautiful places, how we bring different uses, different people, different communities together and create fantastic places. And it was also about developments being beautifully placed, that we actually put them in the right location for that development to happen. And some of the challenges that Les touched on were exactly the brief that we were given at the Commission. We need more homes of all types. We've got the challenge of 2050 and carbon neutrality. We need to look at how we revitalise our left behind centres, our town centres, our cities, and repurpose them. And then the last one, that we should be worrying far more about mental as well as physical health and well-being in how we plan homes and places. And as I said, that was immediately pre-COVID. You can amplify that now. But then the last thing the government asked us to look at, why do people oppose development so much when they know how much we need it? And that's something I'd like to touch on, because the need for housing for older people, as Les just outlined, it's clear. This is a snapshot literally off the government website. So if everyone knows the benefits that this can bring, it should be a form of housing that every community would welcome with open arms, because it's needed so much. And yet there are so many retirement schemes that are objected to through the planning process. And you can say that every development, as Patrick will testify, gets objections. It doesn't matter what you want to build. But there are actually some quite deep-rooted concerns about this particular type of development that we perhaps don't necessarily get our heads around when we look at planning being a barrier to it happening. So I've just grabbed a few, some of them quite local that I was aware of. Bourton on the Water, traffic impact in a congested town centre. So impact on physical and primary infrastructure. The Westbury one, lack of access to services. Stowe, drawing life outside of the settlement boundary. Our former Prime Minister objecting in terms of overdevelopment, although to be honest, she is a serial objector to development these days. So I'm going to park that one a little bit. The one in the bottom right, very close to home for me, was literally a town councillor objecting from his own backyard, which kind of says it all, really. And if I had to say there's something in that photograph that's overbearing, I wouldn't actually put it as the retirement development, because that was absolutely stunning. It's won no end of design awards. It's a fantastic addition on a brownfield site on the edge of the town, but it really had opposition out in force. But setting that aside, the comments from the chair of the Stowe Town Council I did think were interesting. He said it's totally inappropriate for Stowe, which is already a very old town. We've got more than 35% of people over retirement age. This, together with the other retirement development, will give us 200 to 300 more fairly elderly people. And what this town really needs is affordable housing for young people. These two major developments are being put outside the development boundary. The developers are talking about providing facilities in their development, but we've already got those in Stowe. Why should they be creating competition for existing businesses who are having a hard enough time of it as it is? So in many areas, it's viewed as a threat, that it's taking opportunity away from young people, that we're promoting places for people to retire to, that we're importing people with care needs into a place that will have a further drain on stretched GP and hospital services. And it's a bit of a sort of urban myth, because actually, although it's the retire to the Cotswold, the vast majority of people already have a local connection. But in local people's eyes, it's not going to free up family housing in the town, because the benefit's not going to go to people that live locally. So are we offering the right kind of solutions? As was said, 3.5 million older people have expressed an interest in downsizing and potentially moving to a retirement property in the UK. Yet, despite the significant wealth here held by many older people, we're still way behind the supply and type of schemes in the US, Australia, and many parts of Europe. And with the current market trends, it would take 20 years for supply to meet the demand for just half of those people aged 60 plus that said they were interested in downsizing. And we are delivering some stunning age-appropriate developments. But actually, are we meeting the full market needs with the kind of homes and the way of life that we're offering? And if we add into that the need for housing with care, and let's not merge the two because they are separate, but we still need to think differently. But I think part of the issue is when you look at a lot of the marketing, there is a tendency to lump them all in together. And what other market segmentation takes a 40+ year age group and treats them as an homogenous commodity? I mean, if we look at Shakespeare's 7 Ages of Man, we've got people that's just coming through middle age spread in age 5, right the way through to people coming to the end of Act 7. You know, that is a massive spread. Then from a planning point of view, we debate whether they're C2 or they're C3. We debate whether they should have affordable housing or not. we are catering for two different customer groups, choice-based and needs-based. And then layer onto that, those who can afford to buy and those who need high quality, affordable. And who are we targeting? Well, I saw that on Twitter the other day, and it's just no, over 45s. Now, I don't want to go full on P to K at this point, but over 55s is bad enough. What the heck do they think happens to us when we hit 45? What kind of messaging is that meant to be given out? So in terms of looking at some of the models, you know, retirement villages were held up to be, you know, the model. There's been a huge scaling up, huge, as Les said, investor appetite to actually put money into this sector. And they can offer that choice. They can deal with downsizing or right sizing. They can offer the different levels of care and support. But for all of their positives, there are balancing pretty significant negatives. The cost, particularly from an ongoing revenue perspective, and perhaps the lack of diversity as well. So whether we debate whether they're a grandma's ghetto or a country club, they do tend to be exclusive and not inclusive places. They are still often ultimately needs-based decisions, even though the marketing points to the lifestyle choice. But the biggest one for me is how sustainable are they as a development model? They just about work for a cohort of people now who own outright, who have significant equity in property, and who have final salary pension schemes. What about the generation coming through whose pensions are defined contributions, not defined benefits, who may have divorced or not married? They may not have enough equity in property because they've had to divvy up. Where's that choice in the mid-market price range for those that can't afford a retirement village, but would never qualify for or necessarily want an affordable product or an extra care? Do they really offer the optimum choice? I worked on a couple of retirement villages a few years ago. Fantastic education for me about the whole process. But one was located on the edge of a leafy village in the Shires, and the other was on the edge of a new build consortium housing site. And it was the second one in the urban environment that sold far quicker off plan because it had the facilities there, the pub, the leisure centre. It felt part of a more multi-generational community, that you had the benefit of being in a retirement development and knowing who your neighbours were, but you didn't feel like you were living in an old folks home. At one of the consultations, a woman came up to me, she says, I'd bloody hate to live there. It'd be full of old people. And she must have been 70 if she was a day. None of us want to think we are old, that we're going to be sitting in God's waiting room. We need to keep talking about multi-generational places, but we really don't plan them very well. We'll put a zone on a master plan that says retirement stroke care. You know, that's why for Lovell, later living, moving in to our housing arm was such an important way of challenging our thinking on how we plan our larger new places. So to go back to the exam question as to whether we're challenging the status quo, I would like Paula to propose this afternoon that we allow status quo to challenge us, because Messrs Parfitt and Rossi were over 60 when they played their first headline set at Glastonbury back in 2009. They never changed. They still wore double denim. They still played the same three chords. They were the same people they had always been, and they were loving life. And so was the band that also advocated, let's have a drink, it's margarita time. When I was looking at some of the different options, this one came up. In 2017, the American singer-songwriter Jimmy Buffett announced plans to launch a themed retirement community based on his Margaritaville song and a chain of restaurants. It's about growing older, not growing up. 100,000 American people signed up for it on its launch. He's now broken ground on a second scheme. How do we want to live out our later years? You know, I once did a development alongside a Catholic priest, which is one for another day and some real stories to share. But he said when he was retiring, he was planning on going on back-to-back world cruises because they had top-notch medical facilities, you know, operating theatres and no waiting lists, food and activities on tap, constant company and different people, yet he still had his independence. He could see the world, he could live life to the full, and he'd worked it out. It was a damn sight cheaper than the private care village he'd looked at. And it was looking like it was a lot more fun as well. So again, it's thinking about what we want to do and who we are going into our later years. Paulie, you've talked a lot about housing the Sex Pistols generation. Well, I can say you've got this one, the granny goth mode, coming up rapidly behind, who couldn't think perhaps of anything worse than living in a gated community. You know, what about the pioneers of loft living in the hearts of our cities, the urban splash generation, where design, mixed use, art, culture, all as intrinsic part of places they live really matter, where brands add value to their experience? What about them? Because this isn't about tenure and income and those that can afford it. We don't stop being who we are because we get older. And creating age-specified communities can work, particularly when the community feels in control. And really looking forward to Patrick's session on co-housing, because that's introducing an alternative that may not be for everyone, but can tick a huge amount of boxes in terms of community, security and well-being, and one that could work really well across different pricing and tenure points. So looking at a blueprint of what we need to be done, I saw this online, David Sinclair, and thought it was brilliant. And I'm going to rattle through a few of them. Let's design good, attractive products and services which work and that people want. And that includes age-appropriate adaptations for a generation that loves flicking through a Lakeland catalogue. Let's knit them into the fabric of our towns and places and be truly intergenerational. Let's make them affordable for everyone that wants or needs to live there, and not just think about affordable housing. We need to recognise that housing will remain the main form of wealth for current and future generations of older people, but they may need mortgage vehicles. You know, we may need to look at tax structures, the stamp duty exemptions that Les mentioned, to break down some of the financial barriers. But above all, go back to what Roger said, we are asking people to give up their homes, understand that there is an emotional price they've got to pay as well as a financial one. Make it aspirational, stop lumping 40 years of people into one group, understand they're looking for different things at different stages, and don't use images that seem to deny the aging process. The last one, let's be honest, the housing market doesn't work for anyone, young or old. We're not building enough, we're not creating the right incentives for people to move up and through it, and until we do, we will carry on having these debates. So finally, I've used this quote in a number of different contexts, but I think it works really well here. The models that have worked well in the past need challenging, they need refreshing for a tomorrow that is going to look very different to today for us as individuals and for our society. And that's for older people too. We're living longer, our health and care needs are more complex, our family relationships are often more complicated, our financial security and our property assets will be different. So let's be creative in the tenures as well as the designs, and let's give people the homes that they want and the quality of life that they've worked for. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. I'm sure everybody will agree that was sort of punching well. I don't know whether it was below the belt sometimes as much as above in many senses when you look at the sectors and really sort of challenging the sort of thinking. And I just love the sort of the content around, you know, thinking about how we really do need to think about who are we actually designing our communities for going forward, you know, and really take a step back and think about, we can often get stuck in the whole remit of viability, and this is the way that it's always been done, rather than thinking about, well, how long is it going to be around for and who's it going to be around, you know, to service in the future, and how can that shape for the future generations as well. Absolutely there with the status quo challenge. No two ways about it from my point of view. I think there needs to be an awful lot more of that. So lots of content again there that I'm sure that we'll pick up again in the discussion at the end. So I'd like to introduce you now, Patrick, if you can just share with us your experience and add to the content.
Thank you very much, Paula. Mary, I'm quite tempted just to chuckle my slides away and engage enthusiastically with almost everything what you said and sort of pick one or two tiny bones, but brilliant. Thank you so much. I think having put the slides together, I will just rattle through them if that's all right. You made our motto that we have now at PTE Architects, older people should be at the centre of life, not at the edge. You absolutely brought that alive, okay, and thank you for that. So let's have a look at what I had planned to talk about, if I can get the slide to move on. Ooh, spoiling me thunder there. So this is, this audience knows really well, I would have thought, that there are far too many categories and types of meaningless nuance in the sector as was. This is an over 10-year-old slide now. And really what we're talking about is these three things. Lifetime homes, there was a reference to M42, and we do something called M42 plus, so it's totally accessible. Retirement village, later living, extra care models, which are primarily domestic, and care can be delivered into them later in life. Statistically, it is likely to be the last year of your life that you need really, for nursing levels of care. And I've experienced, as many of you will have, that can be delivered into properly designed housing really well. And you are still in your home, which is absolutely crucial. The challenge I had with this presentation was asked to take on was, are there lessons from co-housing, and what is co-housing, and what might it have to show us? As Mary said, it's not for everybody. This group of people, who some of you would be very familiar with, Newground and Barnet, spent 18 years getting to this point of extreme happiness. We don't all of us have that, and it's a scandal that we should even be considering that that's how long we need to spend getting the later living that we deserve, the last home, best home. But we need to start thinking about we, not where will they live, where will the older people go? And this is the concept of an intentional community. It's a usefully baggy term. It doesn't even have to be spatial. So what did I come up with? Bakers, Strictly fans, that's an intentional community. Football supporters of the same single team. These are all intentional communities. And you would find many of these groups online. But, and here's the difference, proper football fans go to the game, right? They're in the same place. They interact with each other face to face. Years of research have suggested, proven, I would say, that isolation is extremely bad for older people. And taking Mary's point on, let's say, I don't know, 45 to 105. After COVID, we now know it's extremely bad for all of us, right? It is bad for your physical health, bad for your mental health. We are made to live in places that we have to live because there isn't the choice, there isn't the supply of quality housing, there isn't affordable places we want to live in the right location for each of us. And that is the biggest single contribution to how we might live well as we get older. So living in an intentional community, somewhere we want to live, is really good for us, because it promotes activity and interaction. It's a physical place. And again, 7 ages of man, I like this because it takes us down to 3, which is kind of handy. And we talk a lot about third age, the third age of life, third age homes, third age housing, because it doesn't have retirement, care. It doesn't assume any of those things. There is no age of retirement anymore, is there? It allows us to shape our experience and our choice as we get older. This second age of life, peak activity, full-time employment, bringing up families, we understand that as a time of life in which we're all independent. And that is, in our culture, in Western Europe, certainly really important to us. It's not the same all over the world, but it's really important to us here. And the work cited in the WHO report that I put up here, I hope any of you who haven't already read that cover to cover, and it's again, it's over 15 years old, but it is really, really good and as relevant as it ever was. It evidences the fact that as we get older, this perception that we're in charge of our own lives, okay, not taking food, care and shelter, is really important to how we continue to live, to our continuing function. And we all know people, I would imagine, on both ends of that range of independence, interdependence, and activity. So a co-housing community, you won't be surprised to hear me say, is an intentional community. And this set of principles, I don't think is on the UK co-housing website anymore, but Maria Brenton uses it in presentations, so it's absolutely good enough for me. And the ones I've highlighted in bold, I think apply to any kind of good quality housing, especially as we get older. Choosing to live as part of a group is a really interesting debating point. Perhaps we'll come on to it if we have time, because we do all choose to be with people that we feel like, that we identify with, that we have things in common with. But living as part of a group, as co-housing is perceived, is seen as somehow collectivist, stroke hippie, everybody's going to be having everything in common. But actually it is a part of our really important social experience as human beings. Controlling your own environment is of course incontrovertible. There is nobody you'll ask about how they want to live and say, well, would you like to be able to say when the lights go on and off, how warm it is, where you want to travel to, who would say, no, I don't want to do any of that. Of course you do. And it's something that an institutional setting in the past has not provided in massive extent. Helping design your own home, if I get through the slides fast enough, we'll come on to how much of that might be transferable to a more mainstream market offer or a mainstream affordable offer from the specific co-housing movement. Living collaboratively with neighbours, that's both within the co-housing development, and a co-housing development has an identity in a neighbourhood, in a place. And the ones that I know and like in this country and abroad invite people in constantly. So when, Mary, yes, we have always had the issue of people saying you're importing old people to our area and it's going to have a terrible effect on social services. The response has been, and we can now demonstrate it, no, we're importing active people into the area who are going to have a transformative, potentially, effect on their neighbourhood area and social networks around them. And I think we can start to evidence that. Sharing activities, reducing loneliness, and respecting privacy, crucially. So this community, we all live in communities of one kind or another, is only viable where we also have the privacy we need. And all well-designed housing with a common shared element has to achieve that balance of security and privacy, sociability and invitation. So I've unpicked this a bit from some presentations I've done with members of co-housing groups, where we've looked at what do people invest, what are the tangible benefits, and we'll come on to intangible benefits. I'm going to run through these quite quickly just to provoke some thought, and because I've only started thinking about this, started talking with Paula and others about it, about what are the transferable qualities, and I'm sure this will evolve. So in the co-housing world, the time building the community that is going to have a physical expression in the place is an investment. And the Old Women's Co-housing Group at New Ground had to invest a large number of years. It doesn't have to be that long, but it is always years. It's not months, and it is a commitment. And that actually bears fruit both in the tangible and intangible benefits. But what might the equivalent be? And really, if you're looking to buy a product, rent a product, move into a product, it is the search time and the time spent getting to know it and comparing different products, I would suggest, is the investment. You invest in compromise in a co-housing group because you bring all your aspirations to it. If you do a co-design process, those become part of the bigger project. If you're coming to an established group, you're deciding what you want to take on of the group, where you want your privacy. And of course, each member joining a group has an effect on that group. So it's a give and take. And in later living housing that we might find, perhaps the equivalent is in the variety available in different, and your investigation of that in the location you need. Program uncertainty is a factor of development. So if somebody else is developing it and they know what they're doing, that's a simple positive of more mainstream housing, as with financial clarity. And you're not going to be putting your work, your sweat equity into the scheme. You're going to be putting your money in, but there are really interesting possibilities about combining rental, purchase, shared equity, shared ownership. So there's an equivalent there, perhaps. Tangible benefits. Again, I'll run through really quickly. The daylight issue the increasing importance of daylight as we get older, and I'll put my hand up, I'm beginning to experience this myself, is something on every scheme for older people, and actually the rest of us that we've done, is a huge benefit of modern housing. Okay, so that goes across the board. Bespoke flat layouts will come on to what degree is that possible to offer in a wider context. It goes from, oh, if you're buying off plan, we can give you a different kitchen, different bathroom, different finishes, carpets, curtains, whatever it might be, right through to, if you're at a certain stage, can we allow you to move around the elements of your flat with certain fixed pieces? Common laundry is really interesting because that's seen by 2-3 co-housing groups that I deal with a lot as a real benefit, something they made a positive choice to have. It means not everybody has a washing machine in their flat. It means big drying area outside, and it's a really sociable place at the right time of year. When providers with lots of experience are providing developments for older people, something like a common laundry, I have often been in conversations where it's seen as patronising, old-fashioned. We need to look at it from the point of view of the person who's going to live there and ask them rather than tell them what that is. And it introduces for us the role of shared communal facilities and service charge coming in there as well, in a development which is not managed by, owned by, and with the financial participation of the residents. How is all that resolved? I'm sure it's resolvable, but how much of it will be a real benefit? So that's an open question. Sociable circulation is the sociability of any scheme with common areas, or even individual houses, how they relate to the rest of the development, to the place, is absolutely crucial to us. And we only have to look back at the developments of the post-war era, where very often it's quite hard to find the entrance, to see that nobody's being invited into that place. That place is not trying to have a connection to its neighbourhood, is not trying to do all of the great things that Mary was talking about. And then guest flats, gardens, how all that is designed, managed and paid for. The guest flat is something that would encourage people to move from a bigger house down to somewhere where they can still have guests but don't need to pay for that space all the time. And gardens come really high up. The enjoyment of gardens comes really high up people's list of what they want in a home that they want to move to, an intentional community, but not so much maintaining it possibly, although some people will still really enjoy it. And it's an absolutely key theme at New Ground, which is designed around a garden and was, from the residents' perspective, from the beginning. So the intangible benefits. This is more of a conversation starter than something I'm massively going to elaborate on now. But that sense of ownership, can placemaking give a proportion of that sense of ownership of a group of people who've been on a journey for a number of years to achieve the home that they want to achieve? I would suggest, I'm going to assert, it can't provide the whole thing, but is there a sense of belonging that it can offer to people who are coming to buy, rent in an existing community? And choosing to join in, can we encourage levels of participation, balance that with service charge, which again replicate that positively experienced facet of many co-housing schemes? So at New Ground, very briefly, the tenants of the affordable homes were not part of the collaborative design process because of the way the procurement worked. And one or two of them were a little anxious. They joined the group first, just before the development opened, and then moved in. And the thing that a couple of them I spoke to about, or we spoke about, were anxious about was how communal is this going to have to be? How much do I want to join in? And the two, at least three, all three of the people I'm thinking of have said to me since, I'm doing far more than I ever intended to, because it works for them and they want to be part of that offer life, activity and social life. And the shared project will lump in for this with the sense of ownership. How can we replicate some of that intentionality and desire and aspiration within it? Continuing personalization, that's what we all do to our homes, isn't it? And it's a question of degree, and it's a question of how we can show and demonstrate to new rental purchasers that that is available. Intentional community and pride and achievement. A couple of quick zooming out examples. So I'm very glad I put this slide in now because of many of the things that Mary was talking about. Can you have a development which includes here in Muswell Hill, Frank Hanover, 70% third age homes, none of which look like any kind of old people's home, but also include within the same development public routes through very expensive family housing, affordable family housing, refurbished heritage buildings, many retained trees and landscape features. I've met a number of people who live around Muswell Hill since we finished this, a few of whom were not aware that it was had an older people's housing component to it at all of whom had chosen to walk through it on their way to Highgate Woods and other things. So I'm taking that as really successful in those respects. And the thing that makes it, apart from the accessibility of the sociable landscape and the design of the flats, the fact that it's got a common room, which was a lot of debate in the process of development, it is constantly booked out. Right, the common room and guest room in one part of the development, and telecare is available throughout it. And these are enabling things that are not obtrusive, are not characterising the development, but are enabling people to live how they want to live in this place. And finally, going back to my script, which I left behind some time ago, I just wanted to put a conclusion up over this. So, as I said, there are lots of conversations just starting to gather pace around how the lessons of co-housing can help us innovate, offer more of what people have shown will attract them to the wider market. And that in turn, logically, will produce many more age-appropriate homes than we currently have. And let's get on with developing these design and delivery ideas in parallel, closer together, with the kind of people in this audience and on this panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Yeah, that's great. And I think everybody hopefully can start to see how this is all sort of connecting together. And we're getting some great questions that are already going into the question and answer section, which is really, really good to see. Some of them is quite thought-provoking from the point of view of asking ourselves about how we should design and what should be included within a home that is suitable. And I think the thing that's always striked me right throughout my career is the absolute diversity. We're never going to be able to get a design that fits everybody. You know, we're all in each individuals. There's been the key points made already throughout this session talking about, you know, we must be designing for ourselves. We must be thinking about place for ourselves, and that we are all individuals. So rounding up the session of speakers today before we go into the panel discussion is Greg, who's joining us from Department of Levelling Up. And hopefully, Greg, you're going to be able to give us a little bit of an insight into what the government's view is.
Thanks very much, Paula. And just to say, first of all, really pleased to be speaking to everyone here today, and especially pleased to be on a panel alongside Les, Patrick, and Mary, who've all given really insightful, really interesting talks so far. So, as Paula says, I'm here from the Department for Levelling Up Housing Communities to talk a little bit about what government's doing in this space, and I work specifically on older people's housing, particularly on the launch of the Older People's Housing Taskforce, which was announced in the Levelling Up white paper last year. And the push behind this, the Older People's Housing Taskforce is really building on some of the things that have been mentioned in the talk so far. So we're really keen to ensure that older people have a choice of suitable accommodation, and that we're improving the supply and the diversity of housing options available to them. And as some people have mentioned so far, and as Les outlines very clearly in his review, the benefits on offer to older people from having a better choice of accommodation, and the wider benefits of this to government and socially and economically to the wider population are enormous. There's lots of opportunities here. We hope that the Older People's Housing Taskforce is going to be a way to build on some of the other interventions that government's making in this space through investment through the Affordable Homes Programme, through the Care and Support Specialised Housing Fund and the Disabled Facilities Grant, And hopefully some of you will have seen that the provisions in the National Planning Policy Framework around provision of older people's housing are being consulted on. The consultation finished yesterday with the prospectus, and there'll be a fuller consultation later in the year, trying to set out clarity around expectations about planning for older people's housing for local authorities. So I think that's a positive step in the right direction, and hopefully the task force will have much more to do in building upon that. We've had lots of productive engagement with stakeholders across the sector, including HousingLIN, including with Les and others, and visits to sites, including the one Patrick's mentioned, the older women's community housing in Barnet. So I think there's lots more opportunities in future for more visits to increase our understanding, to increase our engagement with the sector. But so far from our work on this, there's been lots of positive engagement between us and DHSC and the sector, trying to bring together different views and opinions on how best to address this issue. So I'll leave it there for now.
Many thanks, Greg. So we'd like to go into the panel discussion now, and I've been sort of scribbling away a few pointers here where I'd like to just get the panel discussing, and we will pick up on some of the questions that have been put to the panel in the question and answer, and really sort of just explore a little bit further, I think, where we think we should be going. When we talk about challenging the status quo, when we talk about thinking about accommodation, you know, for the future, that can mean different things to different people. And so if I sort of start the conversation by, you know, sharing with you the business that I obviously run, where the Lovell Later Living, and how we're approaching this, in a sense, this quandary. We decided, and what I brought to the business was a research on the back of my career working across the public and private sector for over 30 years, and engaging directly with older people, I think was the key point to me, was understanding that people in different walks of life, different environmental settings, different economic settings, you know, a whole host of individual reasons for them that they were thinking and looking at what their choices would be in later life. And far too often, those people were coming to me, whether I was wearing a housing hat as a housing provider at the time, whether I was wearing a commissioning hat of being within the local authority and leading on what those solutions were, or coming to me as a developer and challenging what I was offering as products. The questions were always the same, really, around choice, around, do you actually really understand what we want? So it didn't matter, you know, what hat I was wearing or where that individual presently lived. What every conversation seemed to include was, we just don't really have much choice. We seem to have these you know, this approach to later life, that you are going to grow old, you're going to try and hold on to the family house as long as you possibly can, until you potentially hit a point in crisis. And when you hit that point in crisis, you're going to possibly go one way or the other. You're going to look at what there is available, because you really can't afford anything else out there in the private sector. And therefore, you're going to have to make that choice to move into either local authority or housing association accommodation, or you're going to have to invest everything that you've got in purchasing an apartment, because predominantly that's all that's available. Whether I need all of the services that I'm going to have to pay for every month or not, that's what my choices are. And it was as blunt as that, basically. And so really what I've done, you know, personally, is challenge myself from a business point of view to say, I was moving into the private sector, I was going to challenge the private sector and basically say, we can do better, because we can do something different. We can reach out to individuals who at the moment haven't potentially got that choice. What I can't do, and I think, you know, nobody in the sector can do, is provide that full breadth of choice. And so where we're, in a sense, targeting, you know, products, and we've developed those products, and we've picked up on some of the points that was raised in in the question and answer today, one of them, Emma, pointed out the importance of having 2 toilets in later life. That's purely on dignity grounds, that some people in later life will start to experience, you know, issues with incontinence, and therefore when visitors come round, do they really want them to go into their bathroom and see, you know, the equipment that they're going to have or available there? So I think, yeah, it's provoking that thinking around, but that could you know, be just the same in any house that we develop. So why does that just have to be in older person's housing? It doesn't. It can be in mainstream housing. So that was a key point. You know, there was points that Patrick had touched on earlier, and Mary, around sort of the versatility of accommodation, and you know that we're thinking about that, one, intentional community, but 2, thinking around, well, how does that fit within the wider place? It's going to be there for many years. That community's makeup may change over many years. So actually, have we got homes that are more versatile? And again, that lends itself to not towards you know, a large block where ultimately you are focusing an intense amount of housing and services into the one block, but you're actually dispersing that across intergenerational solutions, and you're creating almost communities within communities. But what is important, and coming back to Les's research, you know, and again, a number of people have said this within the question and answer session, of pointing out about the importance of access to services, the importance of providing opportunity, in a sense, for people to live well, but ultimately also coming back to the point around which, you know, sort of Greg and the team there are focused on, and not just thinking about about housing that we're offering, but also the community. It's part of that community is health and social care. And you know, the bottom line is if we're not, in a sense, within a preventative focus, that need is just going to grow and grow and grow, and we're going to be constantly chasing that crisis that's just constantly growing. So at some point we've got to change the whole setting, and that comes back to, you know, to the great work that Mary had done and set out and inspired us all by talking through about thinking about place first, because then we give choice. Then that's from my point of view. That's what I want to put out there, you know, to the panel to join in this discussion, is it isn't one size fits all. So what does great look like? You know, and it's got to start with that community, hasn't it? What environment are we creating? Patrick, do you want to join?
Yes, I just wanted to add to that. A, what does great look like? And B, how do we show it to people? How do I know what the choice is when I've got 3-4 senior co-housing schemes that most of the country will never see? Yeah. So when Newground was finished, there was a 30-second clip on the BBC London News. They got 4,000 emails in the next 10 days. They haven't given out the email address, right? Because people had seen something they did not know existed. And we're here promoting new and different ways that we might live when we're older. So how do we get that out as a choice to people? Sorry, I'm answering your questions with the question, but so that the public as a whole is aware of these possibilities, can demand them, talk to house builders, talk to government, talk to housing associations, whatever, and say, this is what I want. So there's a bit of a chicken and egg there. That's what I wanted to the conversation.
Yeah, Mary.
Yeah, I mean, a little anecdote again from some of the research for the from the Commission, which wasn't specifically on older persons, but I think it makes the point well. We had a session with all of the volume house builders in the room, and comment was thrown in about adaptable homes, to which the reply from one of the major house builders, who I won't name, was, you've got to understand that our new build housing customers on average move home every 7 years. They don't want adaptable homes. So picking up Patrick's point about answering a question with a question. So I said, so do you think they might have to move because the homes you've built for them aren't adaptable? And it was like tumbleweed going across the room. And I think it is that, you know, we have to think about not just a rigid model. This isn't about a 70 square metre apartment and various other things and milk bottle holders and all of that stuff. we need to think about creating that flexibility and sustainability that they can adapt both for the person that's in them at the time, but also people that would follow. We build in a lot of rigidity and we limit eligibility in that for a lot of the homes. You know, and I think we also need to think about not just when they're first developed. So going back, oh, it must be 20 years when I first did an extra care scheme when they were really new and innovative. And we did one as part of a regeneration scheme in Sheffield when I joined Places for People. And there were a load of the sort of 60 plus council residents moved in. They loved it. Best thing ever. They still had their beer and curry nights on a Friday night. They still went to a club on a Sunday. They still went to Bramall Lane on a Saturday, all of that. I went back 10 years later and the same cohort that had given me grief for years at consultation events was still there. But some of them were in a wheelchair. Sadly, some of them had dementia. And that whole dynamic had changed. So although we talk about retirement villages and extra care of having different care needs and those that really need quite intensive, but those that are coming in younger, actually, if they come in younger, they all age together. And then if you're a 62-year-old that was about to move in 10 years after it was built, it feels like a really different place. And from the management point of view, the average that they were putting staff in and everything to care for had massively tilted to more intensive. So I think we need to really think about this, not just as a day one fixed model, but something both in terms of the type of accommodation, but also how the level of care and management and support can dial up and down. And I think we have a series of models, we predefine them, same with tenure. We really don't think about real life. If we look now, we've got affordable, we've got top end, we've talked about the bit in the middle and having, if you like, not a lower cost, but a different pricing point. How many people are going to go now into older age that rent in the private sector? That don't own for whatever reason? They're not going to get an extra care. They might just want to live somewhere better. And that bit about, you know, the 10 years, when I was at Places for People, we saw one of the strongest growth was in market rent in retirement. And you look at it, and I again see it around by where I live, it looks ferociously expensive. But if you multiply that monthly rent over a year, it's less than a care home and it's a nicer place to live. But if we think about a market rent lower cost option, that's the bit that can start to free up family homes. That's the bit that can help people live in homes that are more appropriate for their circumstances. So I really do think the bit we need to focus on now across the housing market, to be honest, is thinking about tenures and access to homes, because it's too restricted at both ends of the market and not the volume in the middle.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a couple of questions in the thing that are all seem to be linking back to sort of the finance thinking as well. So I mean, we talk about tenure, don't we, in the sector? But you know, I mean, there's a question here for you, Les. Ultimately, that the report raises a poor availability of financial advice for planning what is effectively your last 10 to 15 years of your life. So what did you pick up in those findings in the research? What does that sort of lead towards, and what work is being done in the finance industry? Do we think to absolutely fix that so that people are informed and they can look at cashing in annuities or equity release? Is that the right thing to do? You're on mute, Les.
You've touched on a very, very big subject there. And in the past, I've worked on financial products which purport to pay for long-term care, for example, and soon realised that people simply don't have the income to pay for that. They can't do it from their retirement income. There are people with housing equity who might be able to pay for some of that care, depending on how long it lasts. But I also explored the idea of an insurance product where you used your the value in your home as a kind of premium to get that care, but you didn't actually pay for it until you died and the home was sold. And that was a which I think is still think it's a very innovative idea. It's a devil's own job to get the insurance and other related industries to pick up on that kind of idea. But I do think there are some parallels here. One of them is the in the public sector, you have the deferred payment scheme, where you can stay in your own home, and again, you don't actually you build up some kind of debt for your care, and you don't pay for it until you die or move somewhere else. And I think there are some retirement operators that do something similar, where you in a sense borrow from the value of the property that you own or live in, and the charges build up, and again you pay off that debt when you die or move somewhere else. So I think that innovation tends to be coming from the operators. I don't know how extensive it is, but I hear plenty of stories about it, and it strikes me that that's the best way to go, because what you want in later life is certainty. You don't want surprises like, you know, suddenly your roof falls in and you have to replace your roof. You don't want, and of course, needing care can be planned or unplanned, and when it's unplanned, it can come as quite a shock as well. So I think the object is to sort of live out your days with as little interruptions or financial shocks as possible, and I think the aim of the industry and the hopefully insurers as well, but they don't seem to be engaging very much in this, it will be to develop schemes for doing that. I don't think there will be one scheme that fits all circumstances. It depends on your starting needs and requirements. And one of the great dilemmas in this area, of course, is that you've got this whole sector where people are supported in social housing, and they are not part of what we've been talking about today, essentially, and they need to be catered for and looked after by usually the local authorities. So when I was thinking about this, I was obviously thinking of it in terms of the whole housing market, and I was wanting people to, as it were, I was thinking of a sort of life course solution where first-time buyers would benefit, upsizers would benefit, and last-time buyers would benefit, and there would be a much more efficient use of housing and of delivery of care. But I recognise that must be broken down into different sectors, for example, between homeowners, renters, and social renters. And then when you get into that detail, you have different solutions for each group. But I'll just leave it there. I'm waffling a bit now.
No, that's fine.
It's a subject for another day, really, all of the finance side of things, and
it really is, yeah.
You can't just wave a magic wand, but I am really impressed by some of the things I've seen by some of the operators, and how happy people seem to be living in these places as well. That really struck home.
Yeah, I think that's a key point, but I think it comes back to the point of it's not diverse enough, is it? And so I think that there's a couple of other questions in the stream here that sort of points back to Greg around sort of the you know, is there a sort of a regulation role here more, not just around finance? So I think I'm gonna bunch a couple of things together here. So there's some fundamental things. So Sue picked up on some points out of Patrick's presentation, you know, that asked the question around, is this fundamentally something here for regulation that looks at co-production and meaningful consultation? And then there's another point from Janet as well, that's looking at the stats and the numbers. And we've got some, you know, if you roll that in then with the finance side of it, and also about, do we actually design for people? I can't remember, I'm just trying to scroll down and find it now, but I saw a question around, you know, do we actually ask customers what they want when we're designing the solutions? mean, I can hold my hand up and I can say with a big smile on my face, yes, I do. So all our products are designed through our customers' eyes, and and I pride myself on doing that. But is there something here, Greg, from, when we talk about the task force and we're talking about levelling up, and, on here, we've already said how wide the offer is, how diverse the offer needs to be if we're really going to challenge the status quo, and step up a gear and accelerate what we're delivering. There's surely got to be something there for the task force. Is that there in the ask? Is that there in the thinking?
Yeah, it's also linked to Pat Scutton's question about how many older people on the are members of the task force. I mean, we're not yet released details of the task force, that we're hoping to do so shortly, but it is a case that we do need to be listening to the voices of more consumers, and there's a huge number of reports in this area, huge amount of literature on what can we do in this space to increase supply, drive up provision. But I think the percentage of that which actually engages with older people and says, what do you actually want? Where do you see yourself in 10 years? Where do you want to be living? Is actually quite small. And I think when Patrick and I last spoke at Ouch, there was a really good discussion about, we did with the people in that community saying, we just don't want to be babied. We want to have we want to have our own choice, and we want to have agency in our decisions. So I think there's got to be engagement with all parts of the sector and making sure there's representation from amongst them. And there's some great work done by HousingLIN and Abbeyfield about BAME older BAME communities in Kirklees, which gets you thinking in entirely different ways about communities within different communities within the older people's population. So I think there's a lot to be done in terms of engagement, and we're hopefully going to be doing that and engaging with organisations that also engage with a large range of older people. But it's about getting that segmentation and making sure that all voices are heard.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if that covered all of the questions.
Patrick, did you want to add something to that?
Yes, on the co-production piece, broadening it out from individual co-housing schemes, the planning white paper that made a brief appearance before partly going into the Levelling Up Act, and I guess will reappear in other places, had as its leading objective to democratise the planning process. And very, very short and detailed about how you do that, and those of us who do a lot of engagement know that is challenging. But the answer to some of the points that Mary was making, which yes, we have all experienced, about the default answer is no, is if people are involved in saying what they would like their community to be like from age 5 to age 85, whatever it is, you begin to not have the narrative of just being, no, I don't want any development anywhere, but there needs to be development because my children, brother, whatever, need somewhere to live and there isn't anywhere. Okay, let's take it from there. Where should it be? What should it be like? And the role of older people in that process is really crucial because of the life experience.
Yeah. And do we think that this engagement, though, would encourage, so you touched on a point there about younger people and where children are going to be living and everything else. So something we haven't sort of really laboured on today is how do we feel we are, as a society, doing in relation to encouraging people to move out of the family home when they're under occupying it, so that it's there for family. So could be controversial to many people who say, why on earth should I have to move out of my family home? To other people, it could be, I'd absolutely move out of my family home tomorrow. It's costing me a fortune. It's costing me an arm and a leg, but there's nothing there that attracts me to move out of there.
Yeah.
So do we think that we should do more about that? Because are we frightened of doing it because we're frightened of upsetting those who would say, don't tell me that I need to move out? Or are we just not doing it because we know we haven't got the choice?
Paul, if I could come in here, I mean, one of the things I've noticed through the course of the week, that some of the reasons now are not just about a move to a choice because there's more attractive or a more local property that somebody wants, but actually it's a cost of living issue as well. And so actually people are wanting to move because of their rising energy bills and other aspects, transport and the like. So actually having something that's convenient, simple, and something that enables somebody to maintain their lifestyle seems to be something that people are foremost in their minds, as opposed to the chronology of age. Or the type of property. So again, it's something I think that's teased out. I thought Mary and the others have articulated that an element, and decarbonisation and all those sort of things link into it very neatly.
But coming back to the chronological age though, Jeremy, that is the key thing, isn't it? Because what you've just described there in one sentence is about somebody who's needing to make a lifestyle choice for them. That isn't because of their age. It's a life. They could be making that decision at any age, couldn't they?
Absolutely. Even 45, or God forbid, what's an exclusive scheme for people at 45.
Because I mean, that is a point that's in the stream, is that, we've been challenged by, why do we use chronological age? Why do we have to put an age bracket on? And I think part of that problem is planning, isn't it? Let's face it. That's what drives that.
I was going to say, Paula, that the choice and lack of availability and supply are probably the driving factors here. When you look at all the surveys of people who want to move but can't, often cite that as a key problem. And when you bear in mind that only 7,000 retirement homes are built each year, but there are 180,000 households each year reaching this age of 65, just to pick an age, out of thin air. And this has been driving a lot of what we see. On the other hand, we've seen today huge creativity, in terms of on the design side, on the things that Mary and Patrick have been talking about. I do think that an almost overriding issue is to bear in mind that 25% or more of every area in the country are going to have, older people in using 65. And so this ideal of moving to the coast and living in a bungalow and that sort of thing, I think that's all out of the window now. I mean, it could happen at the margins, but it's not the overriding issue. So what you need is blended communities in urban areas or suburban areas, prefer urban areas if you can actually do that, where a lot of the infrastructure is already available and it can be modified to make it more age friendly in many different ways.
So do you think then it would be a good idea, so again another question that's in here, that we should use section 106 to drive that? So do you think that's the right thing to do, or do you think that wouldn't work?
Well, I'm not close enough to planning to say that, but I do think we need a tool that actually enables us to focus in on what the needs are in local areas, to give some better guidance to operators, planners, everybody, on what the potential demand for retirement housing is, and then take it from there. That's what I'm going to be doing shortly.
Yeah. Patrick, did you want to add to that?
So there are some shining examples of that working. It's not generally joined up enough, to what's needed in the area. Exactly what Leslie said, I won't labour that. I just want to say choice and chronology. The problem we have is lots of older people, as we get older, our choice is reducing, not expanding. Right. So that's what we need to combat through supply and quality and all the other things we've been talking about. Sorry, Mary.
Just on the section 106 point, I think securing it through planning should be what we do. Problem with section 106 is it again tries to get to a definition of a particular model and restrict choice and innovation. It doesn't really ever get its head around tenure and product and everything. What we should be making sure is, when we're looking at larger scale developments, that developers need to show how they are catering for the needs of older generation, or all generations, to be honest, and actually give a proper housing market offer. So it's not just 3 and 4 bed, executive type homes, that they really show they are catering for different needs.
Absolutely.
And I think that goes back to the tenure. Looking at one of the comments about there's no point investing in property ownership if you can't leave a legacy to one's offspring, and your point about how you incentivize downsizing.
Yeah.
I think in the affordable housing sector, and this again is going back years, I remember having the conversation with the council. You're saying you need family homes, but the only choice for people to move into in older age is bedsits.
Yeah.
So get your offer right and get your fluidity through the affordable sector, and you'd be freeing up family homes and dealing with under occupancy.
Yeah.
But again, piece of work we did and looking at rent as an alternative to care home. Rent's difficult picking up what Les was saying, because you always like to feel you've got longer, and rent's very open-ended. You've got to keep paying it if you've had the security of tenure of home ownership. But two thoughts. We did some work at Places for People with a partner that was saying, well, if you were going to rent in a retirement village, in an apartment, what would you rent your current home out to a family? And does it stack up? So the downsizing actually for the higher rent, because you've got the service, you could actually be cost neutral, and you are putting that home into use. So I think in a lot of areas, you can get the dynamics of property prices to work quite well with that. The second, looked at a few years ago, the models of the idea of a lifetime lease, which became, picking up, Les, what you were saying about engaging with the insurance and pension funds. It's almost a sort of actuarial calculation. You're going to have some that will get the benefit of possibly 20, 30 years of that arrangement, compared to others that might only have 3 or 4. But you can give someone that certainty that they've got a home for as long as they need it, and you can balance that spread of care needs and health needs as part of it. And that's the bit about innovating a bit more and asking customers, let's not just involve them in the design and layout. Let's really understand what would work for them. And I don't think we do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think you're absolutely spot on. We're in the last couple of minutes of the session now, and I think we really almost like just getting going, really. And I think this conversation could go on where we crack open the bottle of wine or whatever and sit and chat all evening. So, I mean, I would really like to thank the panel. I hope that everybody that's dialed in today has really got something out of the session. I think Mary's absolutely right. We need to start asking, you know, and ultimately, you know, we've got to really ask, not just about certain and particular things and what does it look like, what does it feel like, what's the investment model, you know, what do you want out of it long term, what do you want to leave to your family, and ultimately is the answer for actually the family to buy it, and that's their retirement plan, and you live in it and you go on your world cruises and do what you want. There's got to be lots of different thinking. I want to give the final word here, just to me, that there's a comment here from Derek that basically makes reference to that ARCO have just done the definition of retirement, integrated retirement communities, and actually, should it be communities that integrate retirement? And I think that there's something there, there's something really there that we need to think about, real people being engaged in the future, and what we actually create and what we do. I know it's going to cut off in a minute, Jeremy, so I'll let you have the final word.
Well, Paula, you picked up a point that I also saw from Derek, and I think you're spot on. And what a wonderful way to end the week. We've had a real festival of ideas. Thank you for really motivational, I think, as well as inspirational presentations this afternoon. And Paula, I think in terms of continuing the debate and dialogue, I just want to remind people we do run a selection of happy hour webinars during the course of the remainder of the year. Perhaps we can invite this panel back to join us for that in the spring, or later on in the spring or in the summer, to review this session as well as how we take that forward. But my final comments really are to thank you, Paula, and for chairing this afternoon's really highly successful session, and to Lovell for your support of the HousingLIN, not just today, but over the course of the year and years. I was looking at some of the participants lists. I think some of you may have notched up all 10 sessions during the course of the week. I'm afraid we don't have a prize for that, but I really hope that you've enjoyed it. Can I thank the speakers again for really fantastic presentations this afternoon. I'd also like to extend a warm thanks to my colleagues Jerome and Sally, who've not only sort of supported today, but right through the week. You may not know, but Jerome was doing some house building over last weekend, and Sally ran a marathon. So again, to them, this has been another marathon. So again, it's been a bit of an exercise for all of us, but they've done really well. The recordings and the accompanying slides for those who presented will also be available on our website, and we'll be emailing it out to everybody who's attended or signed up for today shortly. But it only leaves me to say a big thank you to all of you. It's been a fantastic week. Thanks for making it so successful, and I can only wish you a very happy weekend. So look forward to seeing you at the next festival, or indeed one of our happy hours. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
you.
Bye.
Bye.